Okay, good. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us once again. Today is week 4 of our series, so we got 3 sessions left after today, or sorry, including today. I know we have a couple of new people today, so I'll just go over a few of our housekeeping items from before. So for those who are new to the platform, you'll probably notice on your right-hand side, there is a chat box. If you're on a PC, it tends to be open already on the right-hand side. If you don't see a chat box on your right-hand side, it might be in a little collapsed icon on the bottom of the screen, in which case it looks like a little blue circle. If you click on that, the chat box should open. If you can't hear me quite well on your end, if you click on my webcam screen, it should help with the audio as well. So in the chat box, you'll see at the very top, I pinned a link, and that link is the link to our YouTube channel, which has our recordings of this series. So I know I've been getting lots of emails from folks asking about the recordings from the classes. So if you want to save that YouTube link, you can click on it at the top of the chat box and then just pin it to your browser. And once you do open that YouTube link, you'll probably notice that there's more than 3 classes recordings on there. And that's because it's our hand and dexterity playlist, which has sessions from our series from last year as well. So you'll see on there, it says first edition and second edition. So second edition is our series now, and then first edition is from last year. So feel free to visit those videos at any point if you want to practice any of the exercises. During today's session, I won't be able to hear you, so you'll have to communicate with me through the chat box if you have any questions, if you have anything to ask. And if you have any technical difficulties, like if the screen is freezing or the video's lagging, if something like that happens, what I would like to ask everybody to do is just refresh your browser for the webinar page. It sometimes does happen when we have quite a large number of people in our webinar. Sometimes it can get a little bit laggy. So if you do refresh your browser, that tends to fix the problem. And for today's class, you're going to be needing your tea towel like last time. So a small towel like so. So not a big bath towel, but something small like a hand towel or kitchen towel. You're going to be needing an elastic band. So you can see here, I've got a hair tie that I'm using, but it doesn't have to be a hair tie, just needs to be something stretchy. And then I've also got a little cushion that we're going to be using today. So if you are new to the class, you probably haven't seen these items be used before, but if you can grab them, that would be great. So a small cushion, not something huge. So ideally like a little couch cushion or something like that. But if you don't have anything small and you only have a pillow, that's fine. We can use that as well. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to move my chair back and we can start with a bit of a warm up. So I know in the previous weeks we talked about progressing the exercises as we go along. So in the first couple of weeks, it's been relatively basic in the exercise that we're doing. And then as the weeks progress, it gets a little bit harder each time. And so don't feel discouraged if you feel some things that we're doing in the class feel pretty hard, because it's meant to be that way. We're meant to increase the difficulty levels as we go on, because otherwise, if we keep doing the same things over and over again, we're not challenging you. So don't feel discouraged if you feel some of the items that we're doing today are pretty tough. Oh, hello for those in Toronto. I see you in the chat box there. Okay, let's have a sit back in our chairs. So I'm going to move back a bit so you can see me. Yeah, I think that's good. So we're going to start by sitting forward in our chair. So we want to make sure we're not sitting all the way back and we're leaning into our chair or slouching to one side. We want to make sure we have our feet on the floor and we're sitting forward in our chair. So even though our exercises are for the hands, we do have to remember that our posture and our shoulder position, our back position is also quite important for the way that we're moving our hands, because you can imagine everything's connected. And if we're slouching in a way where we're kind of closing down the front of our shoulders and chest, you can imagine you're probably not going to get very good movement in the arms at all, and therefore your hand movement will be a little bit tough too. So we'll have a sit up, and we're going to drop our arms down by our side. We're going to start with the shoulders. We're going to roll them up to our ears and then drop them back. So they're kind of moving them in a circular motion. Nice and gentle to start with. We don't need to, lift them super high. Maybe start with a small movement and then gradually try to make the movements bigger and bigger. Making sure we're sitting up nice and tall, crown of the head reaching towards the ceiling. Reaching those shoulders up and then rolling them back. So it's important for us to warm up all aspects of our shoulders and arms as we're preparing for our class today, or for any activity that you might be doing, concentrating on the hand. Good, let's add in our elbows as we're doing these shoulder rolls. Really trying to draw some circles with those elbows and try to get the shoulders up at the same time if you can. I know it looks a little bit silly, but bear with me. Good, let's do 2 more. 1 more. And then we're going to now circle the entire length of our arms, rolling them back. Now, if you're someone with a bit of shoulder issues, or you just feel like it kind of hurts you going all the way up, that's okay. Just go as far as you feel you can, but still trying to draw as big of a circle as you can. Doesn't necessarily have to be all the way up overhead, but we want to make sure we're drawing some circles here. Good. Let's do 2 more. 1 more. And then we're going to draw up the arms. Sitting up nice and tall, we're going to bring our ear to our shoulder like so, just so we get a little bit of a stretch there. And then see if you can push down a little bit further. And then when you can't go anymore, you're going to take your hand, this hand, you're going to place it on the top of your head, and you're going to gently pull the head down a little bit further to get a little bit more of the stretch there. Just be careful you're not pulling too hard and hurting yourself. You just want to give yourself a little bit more of a stretch here. Good, back up. Same thing, other side, bring your ear to your shoulder, still sitting up nice and tall. And you're just giving yourself a gentle stretch on the side of your neck. And then when you feel like you can't go any further, use your hand on the same side as where the head's tipping. Gently pull down a little bit more here. Try to drop that shoulder away if you can. And if you feel like one side feels more stiff than the other, absolutely fine. Very normal for us to have differences on either side. Good. Let's do it 1 more time on either side. It's the same thing. Bringing the ear to the shoulder, dropping that shoulder down. Hand up on the head, gently pressing down if you can for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and back up. Good. Same thing, other side, ear down. Then you're going to use your hand, gently pressing the head down just a little bit further for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relaxing here. Okay, still sitting up nice and tall. We're going to float both of our arms up in front of us, palms facing down. We're going to pull those elbows back and squeeze the shoulder blades together. So from the back, it looks like this. You're squeezing the shoulder blades together, pulling those elbows back toward each other just to get the shoulder blades moving. Holding it for just a second or two, and then we're going to float the arms forward again. Same thing. Pulling those elbows back, open the elbows wide, squeeze the shoulder blades together, and then bringing them forward again. Let's do 2 more. Pulling the elbows back, squeezing those shoulder blades together, and then bringing it forward. Last one. Opening the elbows nice and wide, squeeze those shoulder blades together, and then bring it forward and resting the arms. Okay, we're gonna take one of our hands and we're gonna go to the outside of the opposite knee. The other hand, you're gonna grab hold of your chair if you can, sitting up nice and tall, using both of your hands to rotate your trunk to one side, giving yourself a nice rotational stretch. Sitting up nice and tall, imagine your spine being like a towel and you're wringing it, you're wringing the towel. So your spine is nice and long, holding it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. Same thing on the other side. Hand to the outside of the opposite knee. The other hand is grabbing hold of your chair, sitting up nice and tall, rotating the spine, using your arms to pull yourself over in that rotation just a little bit more, holding it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. Okay. We're going to bring one of our arms forward, so palms facing down. We're going to start with our sensory loading. Taking your other hand, start at the very top of the shoulder. You're going to gently pat down the length of your arm. So this is just loading our nerve endings a little bit and waking them up and stimulating those nerve endings so our brain remembers that our arm is here, and it helps us get the movements going a little bit easier when we start moving our hands. So gently patting all the way down the length of your arm, all the way to those fingertips and back up. So we're not smacking our arm, right? So we're doing a gentle pat, a gentle tap all the way down, okay? Just to give our nerve endings a little bit of stimulation. Good. And then you're going to flip the arm over. So now you're doing the inside of your arm. And we're doing the exact same thing, patting all the way down the length of the arm, all the way to the fingertips, not forgetting about the palm, and all the way back up. Same thing again, patting all the way down and all the way back up. Good, one more, patting all the way down, nice and gentle taps. Don't forget about the fingers. And all the way back up. Good. We're going to now flip the palm down again, same arm. We're now going to squeeze down our arm. So remember, we're not squeezing the heck out of our arm, right? But we want to just gently give it a little bit of a squeeze to stimulate those nerve endings, but we're not hurting our arm, right? Making sure you're doing the thumb too, right? And then squeezing all the way back up. It's almost like giving yourself a little bit of a massage. All the way down the arm, not forgetting about the thumb, the fingertips, the palm, and then all the way back up. Good. Let's drop the arm. Let's do the same thing on the other side, palm facing down, starting with the little pats, right? The little tap, the light, gentle tap down the arm, and then all the way back up, waking up those nerve endings. Not smacking your arm too hard, right? Emphasis on the gentle taps all the way back up. Making sure you're getting the entire length of the arm, not forgetting about the wrist or the fingertips, and all the way back up. Good. And then we're going to flip the arm over. So the inside of your arm is what we're tapping on now. All the way down, making sure you get the palm, the thumb, the fingertips, then all the way back up. That's it, you got it, well done. Keep going, all the way back up. Good, and then we're gonna turn the arm over again. This time you're squeezing down the arm. Gentle squeezes, just to wake up those muscles, wake up those nerve endings all the way down to the very tips of our fingers. And then all the way back up. and then down again. Making sure to get the fingertips and the thumb as well. Good, and rest. Okay, we're now going to bend our elbows, palms facing up, and we're gonna keep our elbows tucked into our side, and we're gonna do some forearm rotation. So we're gonna try our best to turn the palm down as far as we can. So almost like you're trying to get the thumb to the floor, but without the elbows coming out. So turning that forearm as far as you can, holding it for a few seconds, and then we're going to turn our pinkies up to the ceiling as far as we can. So making sure here that when you're doing this movement, you're keeping your elbows bent, because having your elbows bent and rotating, you're moving from the forearm. Whereas if you have your arms straight and then you're rotating, it's coming from the shoulder instead. Okay, so we're not doing the shoulder, we're doing the forearm. And part of the reason why we want to make sure we're moving the forearm as well, even though it's a hand and dexterity exercise, is because if you think about our functional movement, it's not just our hand gripping on objects, but a lot of the times is you grabbing onto an object and then using movement in your wrist and your forearm to then make a meaningful movement out of the actual function. So for example, if you're grabbing hold of a jar and you're opening a lid on a jar, for example, sure, you need the grip strength to hold on to the lid, but at the same time, you also need the flexibility and the movement in your wrist and your forearm to grab hold and then rotate through those kind of movements. So it's really important we don't forget about our forearm and our wrist. Good, okay. So now we're gonna bring our hands together into fists like so. So you're clasping your wrist. And then from here, you're going to draw a figure of 8 with the fist here, just to help move that wrist into a flexed and extended position. Drawing a figure of 8 to warm up those wrists. Now just be careful if you're somebody with a wrist injury or if you got carpal tunnel like we discussed last week. Just be careful you don't aggravate your symptoms. You can do a smaller figure of 8 if you like, or you can skip this one altogether. Let's do 2 more here. And then 1 more. Good, and rest. Okay, I'm gonna come forward and then we can start our hand exercises. Okay, so you'll probably remember, let me just open the blind so I'm not so dark, even though it's kind of a gloomy day out anyway. Okay, we're gonna start with both of our hands up. So you'll probably remember last time we started a new combination of finger tapping. So we're gonna continue that on today. So we're gonna, right now I have a table. You can see here, I have a table here. And what I'm actually doing is I'm placing my elbows on the table or just above my elbows, just so that way I don't have to hold up my arms the entire time. So if you do have something in front of you to help support your elbows, that would be great, just so you don't have to then use all of your strength holding up your arm. Okay, so both of our hands are going to be open. We're going to spread those fingers nice and wide. So you want to really think about separating the space in between all of your fingers, not just a few of our fingers, but all of them. Spreading the palm out nice and wide, spreading those fingers. And then from here, you're going to keep everything where it is except for the index finger and the thumb. You're going to bring them toward each other. Notice how the rest of my fingers are not moving. Okay, and you're going to tap once and open back up. Then you're going to move on to your middle finger, tapping to your thumb twice and open back up. You're going to do your ring finger to your thumb 3 times and open back up. And then your little finger to your thumb 4 times and open back up. So when you're doing this movement, you want to make sure we're not curling all the fingers in as we're tapping. You want to try to keep them open as wide as you can. So we're going to reverse the movement now, starting from the little finger, tapping once. Then the ring finger, tapping twice. Then the middle finger, tapping 3 times. And then the index finger, tapping 4 times. And then we start again from the beginning. Tapping once, opening back up. Tapping twice. Tapping 3 times. And 4 times. And reversing. Making sure that your hand is nice and open as you're doing the tapping. And we're not curling our fingers in. Good. So as you're doing this movement, if you're new to this, start slow because the emphasis here is not necessarily on speed, it's more on your technique. I'd rather you do slower with the movement, but have your fingers all open and wide than to do it so fast that we end up doing this kind of movement, right? But of course, if you've been doing this for a while and you've been following the class since the beginning, perhaps you want to try doing it faster because you're used to this movement and you think it's getting a little bit easy and you want to challenge yourself. By all means, please feel free to do this faster, but I'm going to stay at this speed just so that way everybody can see the movements in case you get a little bit lost. And you'll probably see here as I'm tapping, I'm making sure I'm opening my fingers, right? Each time I tap. So that way when I tap, I'm not like this, right? But you're having that gap each time you tap, right? I know there's lots to think about in this exercise. Just try to keep those fingers up nice and high. Separate spaces between those fingers. Make sure you're opening your hand back up each time. So I see a question here, so keep going with your hands. I see a question here about whether the exercise should be done daily or every other day. So I would say the best way to go about getting better with your hand dexterity is actually to practice even more than once a day. So I recognize that not everybody has the time to perhaps sit down and do these exercises, but if you can do it once a day, that would be great. Or if you just don't think you have the time, then perhaps repeating certain activities that you're doing during the day that you find hard. Like for instance, if you find tying your shoes difficult because of the hand dexterity portion, then perhaps you need to practice tying your shoes and undoing your shoes every day rather than leaving the shoes in the knot and you kind of just slipping your feet in each time. Or buttons are difficult for you, then perhaps spending a little bit longer in the morning getting dressed to really practice those buttons rather than getting somebody else to help you for the sake of ease. So that might be something to think about. But essentially, the more you practice, the better, because in order for your brain to change and adapt, you actually need millions and millions of repetitions. But I don't want that to scare anybody thinking, oh my gosh, I can't sit there and count a million of these, exercises every day. That's absolutely fine. But if you're somebody who is having issues with, let's say, your right hand over your left hand or vice versa, perhaps using that weaker hand to do more things around the home would also be a form of rehab, right? So it's really about getting your hand to do as much as you can in order to get the movements to be easier over time. Good. So wherever you are in your exercise right now, just finish off that round and then we'll move on to something else. And then when you're done, you can shake out your hand, let them relax. Because even though the movement looks pretty easy, it does get quite sore after a while if you're doing the right technique. Okay, our next one is the same combination in terms of once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, but we're doing a different movement now with our hand. So we're still holding both of our hands up and we're going to have our fingers all together this time. So we're not spreading them out, we're keeping them together. And I want you to imagine you've got your hands pressed against like a glass window, like in a shop or something, and you're peering in through the window. So you're having your hands nice and flat. on this imaginary window. So I don't want to see any of this kind of cupping motion or the slightly bent position, or sometimes your thumb kind of comes more forward. So I want you to make it as flat as you can and keeping those fingers together, so no gaps at all. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to open up your first web space here, keeping all the other fingers squeezing together. Open the first web space, making sure it's still flat though, right? So we're not then having the thumb come forward or too far back, but you're keeping that as flat as you can. And then you're bringing the thumb back in. Then you're going to move on to your next space, and you're going to open the next space here, keeping all the other fingers squeezing together nice and flat, and we're not, bending one side forward or cupping the hand. We're keeping everything nice and flat. And then you're bringing it back in. Then you're going to try the same thing with the next space over, making sure you're squeezing all the other fingers together. So whatever gaps you're not using right now, so whatever fingers you're not moving right now, squeeze them in together. Only open that gap you actually want to open. And then we're doing the same thing for the next space over, trying to keep the hand as flat as you can, making sure we're not cupping the hand in any way. And then bring it together. Let's do the same thing in reverse, and then we'll add in the combination. So opening that last space here, and then bringing it back in. And then moving on to the next space over, flattening that hand, and then bringing it back in. Then moving on to the next space over, making sure we're squeezing the rest of the fingers together, and bring it back in. And then the last space here, and bring it back in. Okay, same exercise, we're adding in a combination now. So now we're going to open the thumb once and closing. Then the next space over twice and closing. The next space over 3 times and closing. Next space over 4 times. Good. And reverse. The little finger once. Then the next space over twice. Is our hand still flat? The next space over 3 times. Then the next space over 4 times. Trying to get those fingers squeezing in together, and you're having the hand nice and flat, so we want to make sure we're not cupping or conforming our palm in any kind of position. You want to try to keep it as flat as you can, starting again from the beginning. So keep doing this in your own time. Now I'm doing it slow so that everybody can kind of join in on the speed. But by all means, if you're someone who's been following our class from the beginning and you're thinking that this is getting pretty easy, feel free to make this faster, as long as we're not losing the technique of our hand being nice and flat as we go along, right? So I'd rather you go slower, but have the hand be nice and flat, the fingers nice and long, than to do it too fast and have everything kind of curl in, right? Then the last space over. Good. And then restart again. So keep going in your own time. If you feel your hands are cramping up or it's getting kind of sore, feel free to shake out your hand, give yourself a little bit of a rest, and then come right back into it. This looks harder than it seems, hey? I think sometimes when we see these movements, you think, yeah, they look pretty simple, and they probably feel pretty simple for the first few that you're doing. But if you keep repeating it for a while, you'll find that your hand actually gets pretty sore when you're doing these. So it's absolutely normal if you feel like you need a break, or if you feel like one side is more sore than the other. That's okay. That's very, very normal. You can have a rest and then try to come right back into it. See if we can do maybe 2 more rounds of this and then we'll give ourselves a little break. Ooh, you can see my thumb move there as well. See if you can check in with yourself. How's your posture? Are we still sitting up? Making sure we're not slouching too much. Keep those shoulders away from your ears if you can. Try to have the movement only come from the fingers. Whew, my hand is getting sore too. And let's relax there. You can shake it out. So whenever you're doing these exercises, you might find it kind of nice when you shake out your hand, if you close and open them a few times, just to let them kind of relax a little bit more. So there's a question here. Does it matter if you move the single finger instead of the 3 fingers? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Do you mean as in when you're doing the, well, I guess if it's 1 finger versus the 3 finger. So it's fine for you to just move the index, but you can see here, as if I'm just moving the index, my thumb is also together with the index, although it's kind of more intuitive, I feel like, to move both. But it's okay if you find it's hard to move both sets of those this set and this set. If it's hard to move both of them together and you just move the index, that's okay as well, as long as you're squeezing all the other fingers together. I hope that was your question. Okay, so we're now going to take our elastic band, as if that exercise wasn't hard enough. We're going to grab our elastic band. Now, if you've never done any finger hand exercises before, a really good tip is if you want to increase the level of difficulty in any of your finger exercises, using an elastic band is a really good way to add some weight to it. So much like if you were doing exercises for your arms or legs, a lot of the times you might get, those exercise bands, the stretchy resistance bands, right, that you use for your arms and legs. Well, the elastic band is the same thing for your fingers, right? So it's like a resistance band, which is on a smaller scale. So let's try this together. I know that exercise we just did is pretty hard already, but I want to add the exercise band, the elastic band, to your fingers just to show you what you can potentially do if you find that this exercise is getting a little bit easier and you want to add that challenge. So we're going to do one hand at a time. So if you take your elastic and you loop it around your index and your thumb and you squeeze the rest of the fingers together, what you can do here, so each of our finger opening that we were doing earlier, if we do 4 for each one, it gives us a good idea of what this feels like. So if you loop the elastic around the index and the thumb, and then you try to open that first web space 4 times, keeping that hand nice and flat still, right? You'll probably feel this is kind of hard, keeping the fingers nice and flat. Once you've done 4, you can just move it along to the next set here. So to your index and your middle finger. If this is pretty loose, you can always twist it and double loop it around. And then what you're going to do here is the same thing. You're opening that side here. You probably feel you're not going to be able to open as far, and it probably feels kind of hard to keep it flat. You might want to curve it in, curve your palm in a little bit more, but try to resist that urge and see if you can really keep that palm nice and flat. So see if you can do 4, and then take it out and move it to the next space over. And do 4 here as well. So it's okay if you're not going to be able to move the fingers as far as initially. That's very normal because you've added in a little bit of a weight now to it with the elastic. And then move the elastic over to the last finger here. How are we doing? Are we struggling? Don't worry if you are. This is very normal. Let's shake out the hand. We'll try the same thing on the other side. I don't want to do it too many times because I recognize this is pretty hard. And especially if you're already finding the one without the resistance band pretty hard, you don't necessarily need to do the exercise with the elastic band. But I just want to give you the opportunity to try it so you can kind of feel what the difference is, so that way you can kind of you can use different strength of elastic bands as well. If you have a really new hair tie, for instance, it might feel like it's pretty tight, whereas if you have a relatively old elastic, it might feel more stretchy. So then it makes things a little bit easier. So you can play around with the resistance as well if you'd like. Good. So once you've done 4 on each side, just move it along to the next fingers. Try to keep that hand nice and flat if you can. Feel free to do it slower as well. You don't have to do it at the same speed I'm doing. Just going to do 4 times, so opening 4 times on each of those gaps. And then once you've done, you can take the elastic out, shake out your hand, stretch your fingers a few times. You can rub them a little bit if there's anything that feels a little bit sore. And then we're going to move on to our next one. I know we probably all hated that one a little bit, me included, but that's okay. It's good practice. Okay, next thing we're going to do, we're going to need our little towel now. So let me just move some of this stuff on my table. Okay, so we've got our little towel. So ideally, you want to be using a relatively small towel, like a little hand towel. Your thumb wants to go walkabout. Yes, absolutely. It's very tough to keep it flat. Okay, with the towel, we're going to start with the corner. Okay, so I want you to grab hold of the corner. And you'll see in a second why it's good to have a smaller towel than a bigger towel. We're going to start with one of our hands. Doesn't matter which one, you can choose because we're going to do both in a second anyway. But we're going to start with the corner. And I want you to make sure your hand, when you're holding on to the corner, your palm is facing downward, okay? So I don't want us to be sideways or upwards. I want you to have the hand facing down, okay? Just so that way it makes it a little bit more challenging when you have gravity kind of stopping you from doing this movement. So holding on to the corners, you're going to use your fingers, all of your fingers, not just a few, all of your fingers, and you're going to start to scrunch up the towel into your palm. So you're trying to make a ball with the towel as much as you can, scrunching it up into a little ball. Notice here how my fingers are facing down the whole time, right? So I'm not using gravity to kind of twist the towel into my palm, right? We're keeping our palm facing down, and you're scrunching up the towel into your palm as much as you can. Take your time. It doesn't have to be fast. I'm just showing you the movement now. So you're scrunching it up into your palm as much as you can without the hand doing this, right? Not turning over or kind of throwing and catching into your hand, because that's a bit of a cheat there. Pulling up the towel into your palm. And then when you feel like you can't go any further, so you can't scrunch up anymore, I want you to keep the hand in the same orientation, palm facing down. You're going to throw and catch in that same orientation. Let me just move back so you can see me. So without the towel, so imagine I've got the towel here, right? When you're throwing in the same orientation, your palm still facing down. And then when you're catching, you're catching in the same orientation of the palm facing down, right? So scrunching up, palm facing down, throwing, palm facing down, catching, palm facing down. So I don't want to see the sideways grab or this upwards grab. You want to keep this movement of the palm facing down the entire time. I know it's harder this way, but that's why we're doing it with the palm facing down, because it makes it just a little bit more difficult. Now, if you're someone who finds the scrunching very tough, then see if you can maybe give yourself an easier time by maybe against your hip. If you're scrunching up the towel against your hip, it's a little bit easier. Or if you're scrunching against the table, that makes things a little bit easier as well. Whereas if you did it freehand, like what we did just there, where we held our hand up and not have it against anything, and you scrunch it up, that's a lot harder, okay? So you want to try, if you can, to do it freehand like this, but if you can't, don't worry, go against your hip, against your thigh, against your shoulder, against the table, whatever works for you. And then when you can't scrunch up anymore, try to throw and catch in that same orientation, and then shake out the towel, and then you restart the scrunching again. So there's a question here that says, when I do this, my foot scrunches as well. Okay, that's fine. If your foot scrunches as well, it's part of the associated symptoms where when you're putting in a lot of effort in one of your limbs, you tend to get other activity happening, unwanted activity happening in your other limbs. That's okay. Don't worry about that. As long as it doesn't hurt your foot, like your foot's not cramping up, it's not a big deal. You can just ignore it. But if it's a real issue for you, see if you can press your feet and your toes into the floor as you're doing that. So it's kind of like your feet. If this is, your feet, you're pressing them down into the floor as you're doing it, just to give them a little bit more of a feedback to not scrunch up. That might be helpful. So someone says, is it okay to use thinner material napkin rather than towel? Yes, if you use a napkin, it's a little bit easier because A, it's thinner, so it's less items you have to scrunch up, but it's also lighter, which means there's not as much gravity pulling the towel down. There's less weight, so it would be easier, but it's fine. If you're finding using a napkin still challenging, that's okay as well, but a towel is best, especially because with paper napkins, what you'll find is when you scrunch something up, it holds its shape, right? Whereas the towel, you scrunch it, it doesn't hold its shape because it just kind of loosens back out as soon as you let go, which then makes the movement harder. So it's entirely up to you. But as long as it's challenging, that's absolutely fine. Make sure we're throwing and catching. As I'm talking, I'm forgetting about the throwing and catching. So as you're scrunching up the towel, just make sure, just check in with yourself and just check what fingers you're using for the scrunching. Because I think a lot of the times when we're scrunching, we tend to just move like a few of our fingers. But if you try, so if you look at when I scrunch, right, what I'm doing is I'm using my thumb to sort of pull the material inwards, and then I open my fingers while my thumb kind of holds that there, and then I kind of grab hold of the material again, and the thumb pulls more things in. So you don't always have to do it that way. It's really depending on what works for you, but just think about the movement pattern. And if you're someone who finds that you're only using two fingers and the rest of your fingers are getting caught underneath the towel, and as soon as you move them, the whole towel unravels, then perhaps that's something to think about, is concentrate on that movement pattern and see if you can move your fingers separately to your thumb. So when your fingers or thumb is pulling the towel in, can the other fingers then hold that as you're pulling more material in? Let's do two more with this hand, and then we'll switch to the other side, because otherwise we'll get too tired. How are we doing with this one? Hopefully we're okay. If you're new to the class today, don't worry if this feels really hard. Most of us have been practicing this for a number of weeks, so don't worry if this feels really tough for you right now. Practice will help. And then when you're finished, we're going to do the other side. So with the other hand, exactly the same thing, starting in the corner, and then try to scrunch the towel into your hand, as small as you can make it. So you can see for this reason is why it's actually kind of better to use a smaller towel, like a hand towel or a kitchen towel, rather than a full bath towel, because imagine how hard it'd be to scrunch everything up. And then when you can't go anymore, you're going to throw and catch downwards. So again, don't worry if you find one side to be quite tough compared to the other side, or maybe everything just feels hard in general, because practice is going to make progress. Not perfect, practice does not make perfect, but practice makes progress. And that's what we're aiming for here. So don't worry if you feel like this is really tough right now. And again, if you find this is really hard doing a free hand, perhaps have your hand supported against like your chest, your hip, your table, something like that to help scrunch up. That's okay as well. Because I'd rather you have some support and actually be able to do the movement than to struggle and then kind of just not scrunch it up at all, right? Because we still want to be able to get those fingers moving and then do the throw and the catching part too. So it's absolutely fine if you need to modify the movement, no problem at all. You're still getting the challenge and you're still getting the exercise in, even if you're doing the modification, right? So don't feel bad about modifying. And you might find that you start off doing a free hand, and then as your hand gets tired, you need to place it on a table to scrunch. That's absolutely fine as well. There's no reason why you can't modify the movement as you go along. How are we doing on this side? Hopefully good. A quiet chat box is always good. It means that we're concentrating on our movements. Well done, everybody. I know this one's tough. You're doing really good. Let's see if we can do 2 more on this side, and then we'll leave this one. Making sure your palm is facing down the whole time. We don't want to be doing this kind of catching and trying to get into your hand kind of movement. Keep your palm facing down if you can, and then throwing and catching with the palm facing down as well. When you finish those 2 last ones, you can shake out your hand and have a rest. Good. Okay. Whew, that was a tough one. Okay. We're now going to put the towel aside and we're going to grab our little cushion now. So you can see my cushion here. It's in a square shape, mostly because I like using the corners of the pillow, but it's okay if your pillow is not this shape and it doesn't have any corners. If it's like the circular pillow, that's absolutely fine as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by holding onto the bottom corner. So you can see here the bottom corners, or if it's a round pillow, just the bottom of the pillow. So we're going to do a long grip today. So you can see here my fingers are long. So I'm not doing this when I grip the pillow. I'm keeping my fingers nice and long, and my thumbs are nice and long too. So essentially it's kind of like this, to see how my thumb, sorry, there you go, you can see. My thumb is nice and long, as well as my finger, so this kind of long grip. So we're holding on to the bottom, and essentially what you're going to do is you're going to keep your arms and shoulders relaxed. Let me turn sideways. You're going to keep your arms and shoulders relaxed. We're not moving anything up here. And all we're going to do, the only thing we're moving is our hand. So that grip, that same grip, we're going to open and close again. So it looks like this. You're going to open and let the pillow drop down and catch it at the top corners. Like that, in the same grip. So notice as I'm doing that, since I'm facing you sideways, you can see, as I'm doing that, nothing else is moving but the hand, right? So imagine like those kind of, I don't know, crab claws or something like that. That's the kind of movement you're aiming for. Hope you like my analogies. You're starting at the bottom. So think about that crab, that long finger grip. And then you're keeping everything nice and still. Opening, let the pillow fall through, and then close again in the long grip. Not like this, right? So we're not gripping on with our fingers like this. Keep the grip long. So essentially, you're like this. Like that, okay? Nothing else is moving. And as you're doing this, notice how the pillow stays vertical. So I'm not having a drop down and then therefore I have to lean down to catch it. You're going to try to balance the pillow and keep it as vertical as you can as you open and close and grab hold with that grip. So the reason we're trying to keep our body nice and still is so we try to avoid any compensatory movements, not necessarily because, you know, we're ever going like this in real life per se, but you're just trying to make sure that when we open and close our fingers, we're able to use our sort of our reaction to this pillow falling, but at the same time, you're able to use your strength in that long grip to try to catch the pillow as it falls without it having to go to the ground or without you having to throw it up first and do that. And if you would like, if you're finding this is relatively doable, this movement, when you get to the top, you can do the same thing, but this time throw it upwards vertically and then catch it in the long grip again. So you let it drop down without anything moving, and then you're throwing upwards vertically and then balancing the pillow, catching it at the bottom as well. I know this is a little bit of a strange one, but see if you can get this grip without having to grip with all of your fingers here. You're doing that long grip. So probably for this reason of us catching and throwing the pillow is why it's kind of easier to have corners in your pillow. But if you only have a round pillow, that's okay too. You can just grab hold of, you know, the top and the bottom of the pillow. It's not the end of the world, but it might be a little bit easier if you do have corners to just give you that long grip a little bit more. How are we doing? This one's pretty hard too, hey? It sometimes looks easy, like you're just throwing and catching a pillow, but then when you actually try to do it, where you're trying to balance the pillow in a vertical shape, keep that long grip, that long finger grip, and then also try not to move your shoulders and back. It's actually getting pretty tough. So no worries if you find this is pretty hard, because practice makes what? Progress. Not perfect. Practice does not make perfect, but practice makes progress. Let's do a few more. And then rest when you've done 2 more there. Okay, right, let's do a little bit of a stretch to finish because wow, time has flown by really fast. We're gonna take our hands We're going to put our palms together. We're going to do a bit of a finger stretch. So what you're going to do is everything above your knuckles, you're going to keep together. And then the rest, you're going to fan outward. So lift your elbows. So you stretch your fingers here. So it's like your fingers are pressing together, but the rest is nice and flat. And notice here, I'm not bending my wrist. Sorry, like that. I'm not bending my wrist, but I'm keeping my wrist nice and flat, and just my fingers are being stretched here, and just push them together, holding it there for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and bring it back down. Let's do one more here. Same thing, fingers together, bringing those elbows out to the side, trying to keep the wrist nice and straight, holding it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and rest. Okay, just squeeze your fingers a few times, shake them out. We're going to grab hold of our hands together, so clasp the fist. And then what we're going to do here again, same thing as before, we're going to do those figure of 8s with the wrist if you can. So again, if you have wrist injuries, you've got carpal tunnel, just be a little bit careful with this one. Drawing the figure of 8, not finger of 8. Drawing the figure of 8 to just roll out the wrists a little bit. Good. And then let's have a rest. Okay, from here, let me move back a little bit. We're going to take our hand, we're going to close them into fists, give a gentle squeeze for just a second, and then you're going to open them back up. Try to stretch them out a little bit. And then bring them back in, squeezing into a fist just once, and then opening them back out again. Let's do one more, squeezing them in, and then open back out again. Palms together again. This time, we're going to bring the elbows to the side, slide the hands down your breastbone such that you're now stretching your wrist, pushing the hands together. Again, be careful with this one. If you're one of the people with carpal tunnel, like we talked about last time, holding it here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and coming back up. This time, we're going to press the back of our hands together. Elbows start high, and then you're going to drop the elbows down, pull the hands upwards like so. So you're stretching your wrists in the other direction. Again, be careful if you've got carpal tunnel and pressing them together, holding it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax them down. We're going to take a deep breath in, sweep the arms up overhead, and then breathe out. And again, breathe in. And out. One more in. And out. And you are done. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, got an itch in my nose. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. And I hope that was helpful. We will see you here next week, same time, same place. If you would like to look at our YouTube video, oh gosh, sorry, my nose is so itchy right now. If you want to look at the YouTube video, you can feel free to click to the top of the chat box. And then once you click on the link, it'll open up, and then that's our playlist with the recordings from this series, but also our hand and dexterity series from last year. And you can save that if you would like, and it's the same link. And after every week, I'll upload the classes onto there. So the recording of the classes will be all there if you want to revisit that. Hi, Neil. Good to see you again. Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I'm glad this was helpful for you guys. You can always feel free to drop us an email if you have any more specific questions about hand and dexterity. Or if you have any suggestions for future classes, let us know. because actually this class started as a email thread that somebody was sending over, and they were wondering about hand and dexterity, and so hence why we started this class. So if you have any suggestions for the future, let us know. Oh, absolutely. Olympics, here we come. Well done, you guys. Okay, bye everybody. Have a good afternoon, and I will see you next week. Bye.